nerd rapper, because let's be honest, it's not a very viable source of anything. There's like 5 of us, so I'm sorry, 6, and like 2 who like do it for a living. So it's like, it's kind of difficult, but it is something really fun to do in your spare time. And I think if you're going to listen to it and enjoy it, a good way to, I guess, enhance that experience is like the more you know. So I think coming from traditional hip hop, one of the prime tenets of hip hop, there's 5 elements. Has anybody ever heard this term, the 5 elements of hip hop? Okay, so it changes a little bit, but it's usually rapping, DJing, breakdancing, fashion, and then education or knowledge. So KRS-One has a great book called The Temple of Hip Hop, which talks about that a lot. And so I like to start with a little bit of education with that. Hip hop, the term where it came from, was from a dance party that was held in the Bronx, New York. Cole Herc, the gentleman who an immigrant from Jamaica who came over, borrowed a lot of his mother's records, played them in the basement or rec center of their apartment complex in the Bronx, and he would have these parties. And then no one really knew what to call them. The first one was a back-to-school jam, happened in August of, what was that? It was 51 years ago. And so now hip-hop has become the largest, I guess, most popular genre of music since then. And a lot of people kind of make the joke, or not the joke, but that the early people, the progenitors, had no idea this was going to happen. This was something to just keep folks out of trouble, try to, curb gang violence and things like that. I was like, well, let's just have a productive way where we can all be peaceful and have fun. So that was an early tenet as well, was peace, love, and having fun. And that was always what people said. Let's have peace, love, and let's have fun. And later on, I heard from KRS-One that the term hip hop actually had a meaning. And I was like, well, where did it come from, And he said that hip is referring to something being culturally relevant, up to date, ahead of the curve, things like that. So the hip in hip hop is being up to date on what's going on and even ahead of your time sometimes. The hop is very simply the movement. So if something can be hip, culturally relevant, and make you move, that's hip hop. So you can't have the hip without the hop. You can't have the hop without the hip for a lot of folks. And so that was really where a lot of people started to get their information. Groups like Public Enemy came about in the 80s and early 90s that were literally the generation's CNN. It was like, this is where we find out what's happening. And so hip hop became a very informative thing. Now, nerdy rap, I really can't say where it began. Probably, some people will say Weird Al is probably the first example of nerdy rap. They're like, oh, white and nerdy, or something like that. I really couldn't tell you. There are so many different places where I think it started. There's a great rapper by the name of Bismarcky who also did Yo Gabba Gabba. Also was a great DJ, and he would make these songs about generally being not cool. And it was almost like the opposite of what hip hop was. It was like, well, MC Frontalot always says, you guys familiar with MC Frontalot?
Yeah.
All right, he's the godfather of nerdcore hip hop. So I learned a lot of this by sitting down with him and touring with him over the years. He said, you know how rappers are usually the coolest guy in the room? Well, the nerd rappers are not. It's like the opposite of that. And I'm like, okay. So Bismarcky made a song way back in the day called The Vapors. And it was just about him not being cool, no one liked him, and then he got famous and people started liking him. He has another song called Just a Friend, which is about him meeting a girl who didn't like him like that, and he was going through some like relationship troubles. And so a lot of his songs were about just not winning at the end, you know what I mean? And so that was, for a lot of people, the first nerd raps. And then a guy named The Fresh Prince came along from Philadelphia, where I'm from. made a song called I Think I Can Beat Mike Tyson. And could he beat Mike Tyson? No. So making some sort of, just making fun of yourself in hip hop music was completely unheard of. You had to be the coolest guy. And then occasionally a few guys would step out on a limb and be the uncool folks. His big hit was Parents Just Don't Understand. And it was just talking about like, man, I want to go out and have fun, and my mom's just making me clean my room, and and people were like, is that hip hop? Like that. It became a real like argument where people were like, I don't know if that's hip hop because like it's not cool, you know what I mean? But I think it just expanded the thought of what hip hop could be, which made it so much fun to see where hip hop could go. And now, all those years later, nerd rap is a thing, somehow. So I broke nerd rap down into a couple of very small categories. I think that when you are considering listening to rap or even writing a rap, there are 4 maybe main types or categories that they could fall into. There's personification, where you take something that of course isn't real or an inanimate object, you make that thing real, and you say, well, this is what that thing would do, say, or experience in this world. Then there's continuation, which is taking, a story, a comic book, a novel you enjoy, and saying, well, what would happen if we wrote another chapter? And exploring that next step in that. So you're using all the characters and all the things. And you have an infinite well of creative tools, because a lot of times, a lot of this stuff is built on works that have existed, especially, when it comes to books and classic literature, for hundreds of years. And for the most part, they can't sue you for using them. But then when it comes down to like musical elements, it's a different story. But some of the earliest rap songs have used a lot of, and Run DMC has Peter Piper and things like that, where they take a lot of nursery rhymes, traditional folk songs, and flip those into raps. I always say Aesop's Fables over beats is nerdy rap a lot of times, So there's personification, continuation, and then application, which is, I think, taking fantasy and putting it in real life. Like, what if Spike Spiegel landed in Florida, and exploring that. So taking elements that we already know and enjoy, and then putting them in a real life environment and making them strange. Jonathan Colton's Zombie song comes to mind, things like that, where we get to have a lot of fun bringing things into a new world. And lastly, my favorite, bastardization. This is where you can take whatever you enjoyed as a kid or a preteen and then completely turn it on its ear and make it ridiculous. You can make it raunchy, you can make it silly, you can make it more serious, you can do whatever you want with it. And I think that is usually, and I used to kind of get, I guess it's like the intention of it is where like your level of attachment to the art can vary. I wrote an album about Final Fantasy VII that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to basically retell the story, kind of in the vein of, this was before Hamilton, but I guess Hamilton's the best thing I could relate it to. It's like, let's just retell this historical event that happened in this game in 1997, and make it today, and have fun with it. And then one of the first YouTube comments said, "Man, this is like somebody just took the greatest, my favorite food, and then they just took a crap right on it." That was like the top comment, and I was just like, wow, okay. And again, so you gotta have a bit of a thin skin to create, and I think that was my first lesson in that, because I was like, who are you? What is this? You know what? Kyle 627, I'm gonna find you. Where are you? Where do you live? And then I had to realize, like, it's okay. Like, these things are these are little feeder trolls. And but through the creation of things like that, you gotta realize, though, when you're messing with people's childhoods, there are potential repercussions. I mean, you can ask any Star Wars fan, or as I say, fan, because the Star Wars fandom, I feel like I'm a big wrestling fan, and I used to think wrestling had the worst, like most toxic fandom. But I feel like Star Wars folks are very much, not my Star Wars. There's a lot of that happens in it. So people will take ownership with something that has a very big part of their, childhood attached. So you got to think about that when you're making these songs, or not think about it. You just say, I'm going to piss these people off. Let's go. And just have fun with it. And I think ultimately the rap should be fun. There are times, I think, what makes nerdy rap, I think, special is that its relationship to comedy, for sure. And I think that if you keep in mind not to take yourself or this content too seriously, you can have the most fun, for sure. This is gonna be an open session where I'll be not just talking at you, but much in the vein of hip hop, their community participation is inspired and encouraged. So if you ever have a question or a comment, something you want to throw out, just really quickly, just throw that arm up and I will gladly answer any questions while I'm in the moment. You don't have to wait till the end for anything like that. All right, so now, when I say hip, you say hop. Hip, hop, hip, hop. When I say don't, you say stop. Don't, stop, don't, stop. All right, so that there is call and response. As I believe it was Paul who said it at one of the events. Maybe the laziest thing that a musician can do, but it works so well. He said it's lazy because you are, as the musician or the performer, you get paid still, but you make them do all the work. But I think it can be very helpful in a situation where I used to teach, so I think that I learned the way I try to teach. So I was like, well, I want people to do it so they can know it. So therefore, every song I'd make some sort of emotion. So it was like this song takes place underwater. Let's work on this. So I'm always thinking about what makes these songs able to be performed well. So, and I think the best way to do that is to come up with easy to remember verses and choruses especially. The chorus is also known as the hook, and it's known as the hook for a very good reason, because it's supposed to hook you in instantly. It can't be a dissertation. It can't be, it can't be super wordy. I mean, it can be, but it just won't be as effective. So, but the cool thing about nerdy rap is that because it's so niche, there aren't very many opportunities to go out and perform it in the world. So if you go to your local coffee shop or your, open mic night someplace, you may get a chance to rap your song about the universe to a few folks who might really want to hear it. But for the most part, you'll live on the internet, which can be a good and a bad thing. I think just, having faceless critics constantly letting you know how good or bad you are might not be great for a lot of people's self-esteem. But for me and for a lot of people, it's easier than going outside and dealing with it and seeing maybe judging eyes face to face, So when I initially started writing rap songs, they were not of the nerdy variety, but I realized that they were taking me into that direction because when I started in Philadelphia, I think the top rap songs or artists were making music that I couldn't necessarily relate to. So, it was again about being the coolest guy. And I was like, well, I don't even think I can do this convincingly. I'm so uncool. So saying, I'm the best, I'm the coolest, and everybody loves me is just not real. And so it just didn't feel right for me. And so I'd make these songs that sounded like they were about to be about me being the coolest, and then by the end, in the vein of the who did I mention earlier, Bismarcky songs, I'd fail at the end. It's like, oh, this girl, I know she likes me, and then I get to her and she's actually talking to someone behind me the whole time. She was waving at them, and I'm like, So I think having the failure, aspect in the music was something that people could kind of relate to. Like, oh man, I've been in those awkward situations. So I think there's a big mantra in hip hop of keeping it real. And I think honestly, keeping it real is whatever's real to you, So I think taking those things that you love and making them a bigger part of your existence is always a good thing. So, if you really love comic books, you really love video games, you really love jazz and all these other things, like I think making them a big part of your life. I mean, Snoop Dogg clearly likes weed, right? Like, I think he does. I mean, you know, we don't like, yeah, maybe he likes weed. But it's gotten to the point where now it is a part of his persona, you know what I mean? And so now if a new weed company wants, wants a spokesperson, they initially start as Snoop Dogg, and then they realize they can't afford them, and then they can find someone else. But yeah, I think I hate thinking about things like branding, but it is important to have an identity and understand that identity and what it is. And so MC Frontalot always told me to have a uniform, and I said, well, what do you mean a uniform? I said, well, you're going to work, so put on a uniform. And so his uniform was, a headlamp and a dress shirt, maybe a pocket protector in there, and that was his uniform. And I said, well, that's really good. Like, I think whether it was live performances or music videos, because now he's instantly identifiable. And I think that's things you got to think about after you write good songs. So I'm like, well, what about writing good songs? And he's like, all right, so here's what you got to do. He said, make sure every song is about something. And that's almost the antithesis of early hip hop, because early hip hop was just about keeping the party going by any means. It's like, you can't stop the music, you can't stop the vibes. And so you just gotta keep the music going. And so the first MC was just a person who got on the microphone during the party, and usually they'd have to turn the music down, and they'd be like, hey, is Johnny here? Yo, your mom's outside. She said it's time for you to go, man. All right, Or, hey, who's double parked out here? I need you guys. He was just giving the announcements. And then when they realized, man, that stops the groove. Like, that's a serious buzzkill. They were like, all right, well, maybe you could think of a way to make these things kind of hip, kind of cool. And they would say, all right, so they grab the mic. 1, 2, 3 in the place to be. It's Mega Ran on the mic, and I'm the MC. And they'll say something cool like that would keep people interested. And then they'd give their announcements or find a fun way to do that. So it was just about taking everyday things and actions and making them cool or fun. So the very first MC was that, who was just giving the announcements. Then a guy across town said, I can do it better than that. And so he'd come up with his own rap. It was like, 3, 4, I am at the door, and I bring it hardcore, and I bet you'll want some more, or something like that. And so now we have 2 MCs in town who are both really good at their job, but they both can't get hired for every job. So one guy does one party, one guy does the other party, and then eventually they meet each other and like, oh, you're pretty good too, but I bet I'm better than you. And that was where the first MC battles started to come about, where people would, for fun, battle, and it was usually for real estate, for space, for gigs, in those days, because there were so few parties to do. So that was, and most of the time when people would rhyme, it was something called freestyle. Have you ever heard freestyle, the term? Okay, so in hip hop, it can have a couple of different meanings, but for the most part, the freestyle is the off the top of the head rhyme, which often doesn't make sense. It's just whatever comes to mind. And it's, again, what keeps the continuity going. There are people, there's this guy named Harry Mack, who is incredible. He's the greatest freestyle artist I've ever heard. If you haven't seen him, please look him up. Where you can give him a topic, and this guy would go off of the top of the head and tell a story about this topic and make it so fluid that you thought he previously prepared it. And I'm like, man, that's some next level brain power that most of us don't have. Even the art of freestyle, it's not super easy, but you think of a couple of crutch phrases, lines, rhymes, and you pull those out whenever you can, and that can keep the party going. Again, it's about continuity and not necessarily about telling a story yet. So like I said, that's almost the opposite of what nerdy rap is, because as Frontalot told me, you must write about something, because that's what's gonna hook people in. It's gonna make your songs interesting. So if you can't think of something maybe about your own life or someone else's life, then that's when I think the great advantage that nerd rap has is that we're all well read. We've been reading our entire lives. We have been watching and consuming popular culture for a long time, and those things can be inserted into what we do. There's probably more Star Wars rap songs on the internet than anybody would know what to do with. And so for the next generation, there would be Dragon Ball Z. There's probably 10,000 Dragon Ball Z songs on the internet because it's been such a big part of pop culture. But if you can take that and try something that hasn't been done with it, flip it on its ear a little bit and make it fun, I think you can find some, at least a modicum of success. I don't know if riches or pots of gold are waiting for you at the end of the nerdy rap writing journey, but I think it's super important to please yourself first. And I always think about that. Like, you got to be your toughest critic, and if something can make you laugh, can make you smile, can make you cry, then you got something. And so for myself, the majority of my music has been about my own personal journey. So it's about me being the nerdy, overweight kid who struggled to find his way, and just trying my best to find somewhere to find a silver lining in that, And so, yeah, there was this time when I traded G.I. Joes with my friend next door, and I got in so much trouble, And now turning that story into something fun that hopefully someone probably in their 40s will relate to as they hear it. So yeah, back to my 4 major types of nerd rap. I feel like the most ones I hear, at least these days in the YouTube space, are personification raps, because I feel like that is the easiest place to start. So if you're ever thinking about just writing songs in your spare time, think of a character you really love, either you found some relation to in a book, in a movie, in a video game, in a comic book, in a manga, in an anime series, any character, and you just kind of start with that character, and then you say, what if this character was, and then come up with something else. Was trans, was black, was living in the hood, or things like that. And then you can work your way from there and come up with some really, really interesting story, I think, concepts through that. So I think personification is probably the best place to start. If there's anybody thinking about starting writing songs, I think just coming up with your favorite character, giving a couple of, listing a few personality traits you enjoy, maybe that you don't enjoy, and then working your way through that. Any questions so far? Questions, comments, anything? Everybody's just kind of blankly looking at me here. Yes?
There are some songs that are both continuation and personification. Crushing in Your 40s does that. And it's how Sonic is 40 years old, technically. His series is well past his due date, and now he's washed up and trying to get money. And, he wants to fight bad guys. But Amy's going to get mad at him because he needs to be a stable person. You can't go off chasing Robotnik now. You're 40, man.
You're 40. Yeah, you got to slow down,
Crushing in Your 30s.
Well, does Sonic slow down? At 40, is he slower than he was?
No, Crushing in Your 30s. I got it mistaken with the wordplay, Crush 40. They do music for Sonic games.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's a really good example. Yes?
I got a slightly off-topic question for you.
No problem.
What was it like for you when you decided to do something more serious, more political, and it became one of the top hip-hop albums of the year, and it had, as far as I could tell, correct me if I'm wrong, one really nerdy Mega Ran song on it, one of my favorite ones, Tractor Beam. Like, for you to see that success and go, but wait a minute, that's not what I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like, what was that like for you, for that to get so much success?
Ooh.
We're like, do I go more deep into that, or how do I
get?
And then you want to kind of like, no, wrestling is my thing.
No, that's a good question. It's referring to an album, Live 95, which I think on that album I had a pretty good mix. I mean, it wasn't super nerdy, but besides Tractor Beam, but the concept of the record was basketball, and so I immediately thought, oh no, nerds are not gonna like this. Like, nerds in sports is oil and water. And I'm like, as I was telling Rob, I'm not particularly good at basketball. I just like watching it. So yeah, I thought like 90s basketball was such a big part of my early creative journey, like the colorful, logos and things, the Charlotte Hornets, and seeing those cool jackets in the teal and purple. And so that was the concept I brought to the album, which was more like 90s hip hop. So what rap sounded like when basketball was in my idea, the heyday, So, but yes, it was a bit nerve-wracking for me to make an album like that where I'm like, oh no, like the nerds aren't going to like this, you know, or they're going to be like, too cool for me, no thanks. That's sports, no thanks. But yeah, I think I was lucky enough to have done an album like that 10 years into my career. So, you know, I could take a bit more chances than maybe in the beginning. But quick story, and then I'll start your question, but quick story. I wrote probably my first political rap when Donald Trump won the election in 2016, and on that album I was I guess the story, it was a Notorious B.I.G. tribute song, I Got a Story to Tell, and I was like, oh, you'll never believe this story. And in his song he tells this ridiculous story about a basketball game having a rain delay, which doesn't happen. And so, you know what I mean? So in my story, I'm like, let me come up with something that's that unbelievable. Donald Trump wins the election. And so I do this song and I enjoy it. And the first comment is like, stick to raps about video games. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, so again, like you can't even worry about it. You can't feed the trolls. You know, I think you can find a way to work those things, the political, you know, angles into what you're doing. But I think as an artist, you just have to create, regardless of what anyone's going to say, and you just kind of you deal with it. And, you know, I think ultimately, if you fall in love with the process, meaning you enjoyed creating it, you know, what happens after that is inconsequential. You know, so. But yeah, there's been a lot of nerves back in the day. Even now, I just did a children's album, so I was like, well, what about, you know, the nerds, you know? And but I think that as we grow older, a lot of nerds have kids, and so we're all kids at heart. So I think that it kind of works itself out. But I think you wind up giving someone something, and I think some press person said it when I first did my song about wrestling. It was about Brock Lesnar, and I think Rolling Stone or somebody was like, well, here's the rap and wrestling combo that you didn't know you needed in your life. And so I've been kind of living with that. Like, let me give you something that you didn't know you needed in your life. And that's it. Just peanut butter and jelly. Like, somebody had to create it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure the first person that put that together, his friend was like, that's dumb. Like, what? And then they tried it. It was like, wait, that's pretty good. Give me another one, you know. So, yeah, you didn't know you needed it, and then you enjoyed it. Let me get his question, and then I'll get yours. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 4 categories, personification, continuation, fantasy, and bastardization.
Yeah.
Where would you categorize, like, the more personal songs that are just, like, about nerdy things you like about being a nerd? Where would you put those?
Oh, I think that if I was going to put songs about yourself into this, I guess I put it under personification, but not quite, I guess. These things are, to me, application, because you're putting your own life into a story and then telling the story through that. So if anything, I would put it, but it probably deserves its own category, like the personal side of the story. I was just working on an Asian kind of thing here. I was in a zone. So I was trying to rhyme, but no. And those are actually my favorite types of songs, where you can talk about the journey of being a nerd and find a way to talk about either pulling through that or just being proud of who you are and things like that. Those are my favorite songs, I think, in the category. And I don't necessarily see a lot of people doing it, but I enjoy those the most, I think. Good question. Question over here, yes.
I think you may have just answered it. But I was going to ask, of those 4 categories, which one is your favorite one to compose?
Okay. I like them all. I think bastardization, because I enjoy like making something that's polarizing. You know, I absolutely enjoy it. You know, as much as I love wrestling and hip hop have had a weird relationship. Hip hop and video games have had a weird relationship. So a lot of people who enjoy it don't enjoy rap, you know, or things like that, and so they don't want rap in their thing. Like, don't put that in my thing. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna put it in your thing, and guess what? You're gonna like it, you know. So I give you a spoon, and you're like, oh dang, that was actually pretty good, you know. So yeah, I enjoy that. I think just taking that thing and making it weird. So I started making wrestling songs, I guess, in about 2017, 18, and at that time there was no one else doing that. I was just searching, like, does anybody make a rap version of I don't know, the story of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I'm like, I couldn't find it. And so I started working on stuff like that, and a website, What Culture, was nice enough to post them every day. They were like, all right, every Monday we're gonna post one of your songs on our YouTube page, and our YouTube has 100,000 subscribers. It'll be great. And it wasn't so great. 50 comments every week being like, what is this garbage? And please get it off of my page. And so I was like, but I'm able to get real feedback, and I don't know how real this is, but it's feedback, so it's okay. And so people are like, get rap out of my wrestling, and they stuck it through. I thought they were gonna come back to me like, hey man, this isn't going so well, let's cut this. But they kept doing it. I was like, sure, I got 12 songs, man, like that's 12 weeks of content. And they were like, nah, let's keep going. Aww. And they did, and by the end, the last song was about the New Day, and by the end, people were like, you know what, this isn't so bad. I kind of like these things. These Mega Ran remixes are kind of fun. And they asked me to come and perform, maybe not perform, but just kind of hang out at one of their wrestling events during WrestleMania week. Maybe like just sign or something, and next to all of their like talent or whatever. And I was like, your audience doesn't want to see me. Like, why would you want me to do this? And they're like, man, it'll be great. And so I sat there and I saw a whole line of people coming in, and I was like, oh man, these are probably the people who put those mean comments up. I'm just looking at them like, yeah, you look like a Kyle 625. Yeah. And then at the end of the show, man, like almost every one of them came up to me like, hey man, like I really enjoy your stuff. Like I can't lie, like hip hop, it was a little hard for me in the beginning. I'm not a hip hop fan, but man, I came around. Like I really enjoy what you do. And I have friends who take the comment, I hate rap, but I like you, very very seriously and offensively. I don't, because I don't think anyone means any disrespect when they say that. I just think that the hip hop they've been exposed to has not related to them or has not connected to them in any way. And so if they hear mine or someone else's and it connects differently, but it's probably not the best way to start a conversation. Like, I hate your dad, but you're all right. No, it can seem that way because I'm very much inspired by hip hop culture and love it a whole lot. But I do understand there's a lot of it that I do not relate to, do not understand, and maybe aren't a big fan of. And that's the stuff that maybe gets the most exposure. So I do understand it, but I think there's a nicer way to say it, I guess. So I'll say that to all of you. If you ever encounter a really fun rap show, you don't have to tell me that you don't like rap, but if you want to tell me, I think it's fine, because I don't like a lot of this stuff either. I say I don't like a lot of rap either, so that's okay. We relate on that. One question in the back, and then I got you.
What
Yes.
would you recommend for people who don't get rap?
Oh, I was waiting for that question. All right, so there's this guy named MF Doom, right?
Oh, yeah.
MF Doom, I think, is the best starting point for anyone who just doesn't understand rap, because he's like, I can't even explain it. Like MF Doom music it's unexplainable. How would you explain MF Doom? Like, it's very wacky, like tongue-in-cheek, super wordy, like silly.
It's almost like jazz.
Lyrically dense.
It's improvisational, like jazz in a
Yeah.
way. It just seems like he lives it, or he lived it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Doom was a true genius when it came in writing and in production, and just hearing some of these stories about how he created music just makes his story even more interesting. He would call himself the supervillain, and he'd wear a mask, and like a gladiator mask, and then later on in his life, they found out that he was doing shows, but he wasn't actually showing up at these shows. He would send imposters that wore the mask.
just like Dr. Doom.
And I'm like, this is a true supervillain move. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like the legend of this guy. Like, of course I'd be mad if I spent money on the show and he sent an imposter, but I gotta respect it. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, this is some Dr. Doom stuff for real. Yes.
And that was his second coming as an artist.
Yeah, it really became his second life. Like that the Doom bots. That's what they would call them. Is there were people that would just come out and you'd be like, wait a minute, that's Hannibal Buress. And you're like, like it became a really fun joke. Like we're like, all right, well we didn't get Doom, but we got Hannibal Buress. You know, that's a question.
By proxy, the native tongue movement that came out of and whatnot.
Yes. So Doom, I would say to start with, you know, if you're thinking somewhere in the 2000s, Del the Funky Homo Sapien as well. He has a side project called Deltron with Dan the Automator. Just high science rap stuff that I really enjoy. Before that, the Native Tongues movement for sure. So that would be A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, the Jungle Brothers, Queen Latifah, Moni Love. This is just a group of just Black Sheep. You couldn't forget Black Sheep. They all just made some of the, we call them Renaissance rap. Like when I hear something that it's like, oh, no one else is doing that. We're like, yeah, that's some Renaissance stuff. You know what I mean? It's very seldom we'll find something in rap where we're like, oh, they're experimenting with new time signatures. They're sampling obscure jazz records. They're doing so much fun stuff. So A Tribe Called Quest is probably my favorite group of all time. So I think they've inspired so many people. Yeah, for sure, from their, you know, musical choices to lyrics to concepts to things like that. So I think those are good places to start. Unfortunately, in 2025, there's not a lot of that sound existing. I think people have taken that sound and, you know, borrowed, and it's morphed a lot since then. But yeah, I don't know if I can think of something that someone put out in the last 5 years that, I guess it would be independent artists like Open Mike Eagle, who's continually doing really amazing stuff. This guy named Milo, who's also doing awesome stuff. Chesky Ramos as well, mixes folk music with his hip hop. So there is a movement of like artsy rappers in the underground that are making music. You're just not gonna find it on the radio. Like it's just not gonna be found on your top Spotify playlists or anything like that. So you gotta dig a little for the artsy stuff that inspired me. When back in the day, A Tribe Called Quest was able to go platinum. Like people really, like they highlighted creative art, and they don't necessarily do that today in hip hop. Right here and there.
So it's kind of funny to me that the people that are listening to some of your stuff that's more political are having an issue with it because, like, for example, you did a whole album on Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
And, I mean, Shinra
Pretty political.
Pretty political, polarizing kind of stuff.
Pretty political.
So, how much of your stuff when you write it is, I'm just writing this to have some fun and have a dance or whatnot, and how much of it is kind of, you said a song's got to be about something, how much of it is got something maybe a little more serious in there even though it's nerd on the surface?
Usually I write albums and I'm thinking in concepts of concept albums. So I'm always like, this can make a good album, not like a standalone song, because I wish that I thought like that, because then I'd probably be more famous. Like, oh man, I'm writing this pop smash single for the summer, you know. But I'm always thinking in what story can I tell through the medium of an album. And so once I finish that, then I work on what's like the single. And that's where like Tractor Beam came from, where I'm making an album that has this sound, and then I'm like, all right, so what would make this a little more palatable, you know, where I could still be myself and maybe just brighten it up a lot more than maybe if the overall tone of the album is dark. Then I can say, all right, well, the single's gonna be a little brighter. I actually learned that from Eminem, reading a bunch of interviews with Eminem, and if you notice, if you listen to any of his albums, the singles are always complete outliers for what the rest of the album is going to sound like. So Real Slim Shady or Without Me or any of these songs are never in the vein of even production style, delivery, performance, the jokes are never the same as what's on the album. And so I thought that was a really cool writing tool to where you just experiment with the single. Like you tell your story first and make sure that story is completed. And then you work in something that might pull in a person that's kind of on the fence about listening to you. So that's kind of how I do it. That's a good question, though. Yes.
I was just thinking about you talking about the earliest sort of roots of nerd rap and some of the ones you mentioned. Do you consider the Beastie Boys nerd rap? I feel like some of the stuff you're talking about weaving in, like making fun of yourself, and kind of pulling from like nerd culture. They have so many references that are supposed to be kind of funny. A lot of it is comedic, but then they have a lot of that pure party
Yes.
stuff underlying it, and then also some political, right? So,
Oh yeah. I would certainly put the Beastie Boys in there for sure. I'm a big fan of Beasties. Their documentary, the Spike Jonze doc, is like one of the best things I've ever watched. It's so good, and even because back then when it came out, I was just listening to the music, I would just enjoy it, and we had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And I just remember some of their conversations that they were recounting. They were like, "Oh well, Rick Rubin, the producer, he made us watch pro wrestling before we started the whole project. He said, watch wrestling." And they were like, "What is this?" And then when they came back to him, he's like, "Do you notice how everyone's just a larger than life persona? How everyone's just like, they're yelling at the mic, they're overly, like they're themselves, but turned up to 11. And he's like, "That's what the Beastie Boys needs to be." And I was like, "Oh, that's brilliant!" Like, and that's what so many artists do, but without even knowing it. But I've been able to learn so much from pro wrestling. But yes, just take what you love and turn it all the way up. If you love video games, crank it up. Like, I haven't played probably 3 of the 5, top rated games of this year just because I've been so busy. But video games are a large part of my persona. You know what I mean? But even when I don't have the time to engage in them as much as I'd like, they're still very much a part of my life. So yeah, sometimes you just gotta crank it up. Wait a minute, I think okay, here.
Just a couple other artists I've mentioned as entrees, like Guru and Gangstar.
Gangstar, yes.
Mos Def and Tully.
Yes.
Black on Both Sides is like.
Oh yeah, Black on Both Sides by Mos Def. That's another, I think, must-hear album. Talib Kweli and Mos Def are Black Star. All their albums are really, really great. Just like so much good stuff. Like where they're combining great beats, great rhymes, smart political, commentary, and like just perfection.
So my question is, in terms of your writing process, do you come up with the concept first and then the beats, and then you freestyle over it and then refine? And then during the refinement, how attached are you to the first try?
Oh,
is it
gosh.
like freshness?
Oh, that's demoitis, which most creators get. You fall in love with the first draft, and I was an English major in college, and I learned that your first draft is crap. Like, that was what we were always told. Like, this is garbage. Like, don't get attached to it. It's probably crap. And so that's what, like, it'll scare me when I freestyle something and I like it, and I'm like, but it's crap, But I'm like, but I like it, but it's crap. I don't know, So yeah, he was asking about the process. It really varies. When I know what the story I want to tell, I write it all down, beginning, middle, end. Most of it is from the English, student in me, where I'm like, all right, what's my thesis? What do I want to tell? What story do I want to say? And then I start working on the song. I need to know what the ending is before I start. Like, all right, where are we going to end up? Otherwise, I write a 6-minute song, and I'm like, no one wants to hear that, And it tends to happen. One of my biggest songs, Splash Woman, the last verse is maybe a third longer than the other 2, because I just couldn't finish the story in time. I just didn't want to leave out anything. So I was like, but I gotta keep going. And I remember my producer being like, it's not even. You made 3 verses. One is 16, one is 16, the other one's 28. Like, why did you do this? And I'm like, I had to finish the story. And he's like, all right, well, no one complained. And so now, the song is 4.5 minutes, which is an eternity for today's music standards. But it did what it was supposed to do at the time. But yeah, like, I used to have a lot of trouble with that. So I started later writing the ending out. Like, let me finish this story and know where I'm going.
So the structure.
Yeah, the structure is super important. But I'll write that, and then the beat will dictate the flow. So where the beat, another trick I think I learned from Eminem was, he says he writes to the hi-hat in the beat, which sounds crazy, but it explains why he's all over the place. So if you think about it, the hi-hat's that little thing going. So he's writing to that, not whatever's happening around that, which is really interesting. So it allows him to be a lot more creative, because you just have one simple thing. You're not thinking about that melody and what's happening with the rest of the beat. So it's easier said than done. I think that's an expert level trick, but I enjoy that, and it helps me to change up the flow a lot more. So So yeah, it's usually concept. I write out, the beat dictates the flow, and then we start writing, but I make sure to write the ending first.
Awesome.
Yes, good question.
You were just touching on my question, actually, but for me, the draw has always been the wordplay. To you, what is the relationship between the wordplay and the written word and the flow of it and the beat of it, and how? Can you talk more about the relationship between those two and how fundamental that relationship is?
Oh yeah,
versus...
the wordplay is so important. I think the most, I guess, typical, figurative language that's probably used in hip hop is the simile. Everybody's like, I do this like that, I rock like this, I do that like that, and it's easy to come up with, where it's like, all right, if I need a rhyme, I can pull this out. But wordplay for sure is what draws me in. My friend, he's a tougher critic than I. He's always like, I only like a song if I hear something in the song and I say, I wish I would have wrote that. And he's like, now if I hear that, then I love it, and if I don't hear that, I'm like, it's all right. But there's different uses for songs. I think there's different meanings, different time and places for that, for super wordplay, I think when you're telling a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, you may not have as much space for wordplay or for, very clever metaphors, but I think that using the entire song as an overlay in a metaphor is one of my favorite ways to write, where you can say, all right, you think I'm talking about, a rainstorm, but I'm actually talking about something else, or something like that, where you're able to take, and then from there, you can take different pieces of what happens in a rainstorm and relate that to some other thing, So there's levels to wordplay for sure, because some of the most, clever stuff I hear are just like dad jokes turned up to 1,000. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I tell, I don't know, Eminem does that a lot on the new album especially. It's like dad joke central, and it's like, I enjoy it, but I'm like, I see what you did there. That's a good question. I have another one over here. Did you have a question?
I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I was just trying to grab it so I could see it to him because he kept getting missed.
Oh.
So no, I don't have
Thank you.
But then you got him first.
I got him. Okay. Let me get you in back.
Is there an app or a tool that you would recommend for someone who wants to learn to create backing tracks?
Ooh. One that isn't AI?
Yeah.
Well, to create backing tracks, I would say, what's the one that I have now? Koala is very cool. If you haven't seen it, I think everybody should download it. It's super fun. You can sample from anything, your mouth, your words, anything like that. So if you can't find beats or sounds, you can literally hum out or beatbox out the sound you want. And then you just record yourself doing that, and now you have that on a loop, and you could write to that. And then you can take that to two musicians later if they want to, build something bigger with that. You can. Or then once you're done, you can replace those sounds. You can find, like, there's a library of stock sounds. Are usually garbage though. In most apps, the stock sounds are trash. But you can replace your drum with this, replace your kick with that, replace your sounds with other stuff. So I like Koala. But I was like, what's happening? I used to use it, but then I saw the CEO was a real jerk with Suno. This is an AI tool that where you type in the genre of song you want, and you give it as much description as you'd like, and then it will just give you a track. And this track might suck, it might not. They give you like a certain amount of credits you can use, and you'll just create a track. And I wouldn't use these for like commercial things at all, but then I saw the CEO of Suno, and he was explaining it, and they're like, so why'd you make this AI music app? And he's like, man, making music is hard. And I'm like, yeah, it is. He's like, so you gotta learn an instrument, then you gotta learn how to record the instrument, and then you gotta make it sound good, and then you gotta know how to sing, and then you gotta put it out, and then all these things, and then it might suck. He's like, so I just wanted to skip all those steps and just make fun stuff. I think anybody should be able to make fun stuff. And I'm like, I guess I agree with that. But the interviewer asked him, well, like running is difficult. Like, eating right is difficult. Like weightlifting is difficult. Like everything's difficult, but you put in the time, the dedication, and then you appreciate it once you get good at it. And he's like, but yeah, who has time for that? Like, you know, we're working and stuff. So like, I just want to like be able to make fun beats and things like that. But now producers, I read that Timbaland uses Suno, and he's done like tons of platinum records. And so there's now tools that he's added onto it where he can input what he's created, and then it can give suggestions of what the next movement of the song should be, or what the next chorus should be. And I'm like, is this cheating? I don't know. You know, like, the purest musicians who sit at home racking their brains coming up with things are like, but you did it in 2 minutes, no fair, you know. But I think if it sounds good, it sounds good. But what I don't like is that they're not honest about the works that these AI tools are deriving from. And I think that's where the issue comes. I think you need to be fully honest about where you're getting these ideas, where you're getting these sounds, where you're getting these samples, and you know, genre like choices. Like I think now, just because of the recent backlash, I think they were either sued or threatened with lawsuit. Now you can't type in Eminem type beat. If you type in a name of a person who's very famous, it will say there's an error. Can't do that. But if you came up with a person who isn't famous, like Jay Dilla, who's one of the greatest hip hop producers of all time, because he doesn't have 10,000 platinum records, I can type in Jay Dilla type beat and it can make something very similar. And I know that you are utilizing his previous works to do this, you know, and they're not really honest about that. So it's a little wonky on the, you know, the ethics side. But if you just want to make a quick thing that you can write to and practice to, I think that's good. BeatStars is a great source. I just read, Old Town Road came from BeatStars. Like a $75 beat that he leased from this guy who wishes that he did his paperwork a little better, because now this song's a humongous hit, and no one knows who the guy is. Actually, weird story about, what's his name? Lil Nas X. Is before he blew up, he was kind of nerdcore, and like that song's kind of nerdcore in a way. It's mostly about Red Dead Redemption, or at least inspired by that. And before that, he was writing songs about Sonic, you know, and then he got famous for that one song. And but yeah, interesting that he kind of took that route, but he couldn't find beats. He wanted to find something quick and easy, and then he went to BeatStars. He looked for a Western type track, and I believe they sampled Trent Reznor, I believe, for that. So he owns most of that song. So that's kind of how that works. But you got to be careful what you sample. Yes.
Kind of related to that, just like as nerd culture is becoming a bigger part of popular culture.
Yeah.
I hear the references a lot more.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere now.
And I'm just curious, like, how do you feel about that? What do you think that will do for more nerdy artists?
Okay. The question was, with people now mentioning their references in their songs a lot more, what do you think that'll do for nerdy rap? I don't know, really. How do I feel about it? I feel good about it, but then part of me gets like crotchety old man, like, back in my day, you'd get chased home if you talked about these things, you know. But I think it's cool. Like I love to hear like on a popular song someone mention, you know, an anime or mentioning a character. What I really like is when the companies, the creators, you know, when they kind of reach back, you know, to the creators. I think the Sonic franchise, the movie franchise, has been so good at that, listening to the people. And so even on the soundtrack, they went back and found a group called Hyper Potions, who was creating music on Game Chops, an independent record label that I put out some of my music on, and said, man, you guys have an awesome Sonic remix. Would you like to put this in the movie? You know, like, so I think reaching out to the community when they do that, it's like a really cool thing that can help those relations. If anything, I mean, we're in a good place because the people who create these cool things are our age, and they're, you know, the people that came up with us, and they were on the same internet forums, and they love the same stuff we do. So it makes it easier to create those things and not have to worry about, you know, being teased for it. But yeah, like today's generation, I almost can't tell the difference between nerd rap and whatever's on the radio. You know, it's I think because production has become, you know, ubiquitous. Like now you can make a pretty good beat on your phone that sounds almost as good as what's out there. There's another rap writing app called Tully, that an artist by the name Tully. It's by a rapper named Joyner Lucas. He created this app, and they asked him, well, why'd you call it Tully? And he's like, well, that was my science teacher who told me I wouldn't amount to anything. So I named it after him. I said, that's amazing. I love that. So yeah, I think in the app they have beat selections from different artists. You can pull up a beat, and it'll allow you to like close the app, or you know, while the music's still playing, so you can, you know, just kind of brainstorm. You can open up your notepad while the music's still playing. You can write down things. It'll give you suggestions. I think it has a rhyming dictionary connected, which may or may not be cheating. I don't know, but it's there. I mean, you know, you got to use the tools that are afforded you, I believe. So yeah, that's a really good app. Yes.
So I like to write, you know, kind of stand-up comedy as well as musical comedy, and my experience personally is that it's easier for me to write musical comedy because a joke seems to be funnier if it rhymes.
Huh.
Is that your experience, or do you have a different experience?
I think it's all in the delivery. If it rhymes, I think that helps because people are waiting for the thing to hit at the end. That was, I took a long time to watch Hamilton because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. And I was like, well, I don't know how I will feel about it. And if I say this sucks, like people will take my opinion, you know, kind of seriously. So I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't watch it. And then I did. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. They did it, you know. And I was like, well, how do you nail the punchlines, you know, over a beat when you want people to react to them, you know? So you got to think about the tempo of the song and how slow it is or fast it is, where you put the punchline, and if it's at the end where they expect it, or if it's not, you know. Sometimes it can be better if it doesn't rhyme, you know what I mean? Where you just drop a beat and say a thing, you know what I mean? And it's like, it doesn't rhyme, and it can be even more effective, you know? So, yeah, that's interesting that you write for both, but you found that musical comedy's easier, or just more like smooth for you think?
It's like a multiplier to me when it rhymes on the joke. I can take a weak joke and
if it
rhyme
rhymes,
it, and suddenly it's
better.
Good. Yeah,
that's a good point. There's some battle rappers that would probably disagree. There's a lot of battle rap that, but now I think to make those things work, a lot of battle rap is without music for that reason, because they want the words to be heard, and in those it's a lot more free form now because they've found that some punchlines are being lost in the music. You know what I mean? So I think that the importance of a good drop is understated. Like sometimes you just gotta drop the music out when you want it to be heard, and you gotta let it hit, bow, you know. So it's all in the delivery, I think. But that's a good question. Oh, wait, in the back, hold on. Yes?
Before we run out of time, do you mind running over the other top video albums?
Oh, I'll just run through these, what I got here one more time. That was personification, continuation, application, and bastardization. And if I was going to come up with one more, it would be, what would I call it? If it was about like personal life. Personalisation. Ah! There it is. Yes. And again, I think those bastardization and personalization are my favorites because you get to show your true self in it, and your sense of humor, I think, comes out in both of those. So don't forget the funny, I think, if you can, you know. And if you're not super funny, find your funny friend and ask them to somehow. That is my time. But thank you guys for being here for Really Rap Night. Let's take a picture. Sarah, can you take a picture? Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna stand here, and you guys just like put your arms up like you're on a roller coaster. All right, you ready? Yeah, let's do that. Hope this doesn't make a sound. Okay, good.
That's why I didn't touch it.
Yeah,
I don't want to do it.
All right, guys, roller coaster. Let's get ready.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this one's a video. I tricked you.
Hey! All right. Also, if anybody has a book they need me to sign, let's come out here. So that I think there's another event